A very good evening to everyone. I am Samiksha Basri, a grade 9 student from the Global Indian International School, Singapore. It gives me great pleasure in welcoming all of you to this webinar of our very popular GIIS Leadership Lecture Series with none other than our very esteemed guest, His Excellency Mr. Javed Ashraf, High Commissioner of India to the Republic of Singapore. Before making Singapore his country of residence, Mr. Ashraf was part of the Indian Foreign Service and has represented the Indian government in various designations across the globe. As Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's office, he was a trusted voice on foreign policy and national security. Over the last 5 years, His Excellency has overseen many successful programs between Singapore and India, strengthening the relations between the two countries. Now, as the COVID-19 pandemic created chaos across the world, His Excellency helped in the smooth evacuation of over 8,000 Indian expats from Singapore under the Vande Bharat mission, which is a feather in his cap as he winds up his tenure in Singapore. Mr. Ashraf is here to share with us his thoughts and experiences on engaging with Indian expatriates in Singapore during COVID-19. A very warm welcome to the GIIS LLS webinar, Your Excellency. We look forward to a great evening of exchanging ideas with you. Today's GIIS Leadership Lecture Series webinar will begin with His Excellency speaking to the audience. This will be followed by a panel discussion with our student panelists who will take center stage with pertinent questions for Mr. Ashraf. Audience questions will be taken up in the Q&A section after the panel discussion. We request you to post your questions relevant to the topic of today's discussion in the Q&A section of the webinar. Our online panelists will select a few questions which will be posed to His Excellency thereafter. This session is being broadcast live on Facebook and YouTube as well. So, without further ado, I invite His Excellency, Mr. Javed Ashraf, to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you, Samiksha. Thank you for that introduction and for setting the ball rolling. Atulji, and to the entire GIIS team, students and parents who would have joined in today. My greetings to you on a Thursday evening. It's unusual. It's very usual now actually to meet in this setting. I'm used to coming to GIIS on a number of occasions, interacting with faculty, with leadership, students and parents in diverse contexts and different settings. But this is a great opportunity, as before I leave, to have another chance to speak to you. My association with GIIS is, of course, as long as I've been here, which has been about 3.5 years, right in the beginning, from the time the campus was quite close to where we are here in the heart of the town, to this extraordinary, smart, and a really well-designed campus now in Congo, which is always a treat to visit, where sometimes the technology can be very intimidating for people like us, but I'm sure it is setting the tone for the young leaders of tomorrow. But it is really a sort of a benchmark in design of a school. It is not just a place of great technological innovation and inputs. It always also has great aesthetic character. It designed in a way to encourage engagement, let a lot of light in, also provide a lot of circulation space. So it is both very open and at the same time very intimate. And it is a well thought out design, I think, for the school campus. But it also reminds us of the deepest values, of the highest ideals that are important for this world. Because when you step into the school, you have the opportunity to see the statue of Mahatma Gandhi. And when you step inside the building, then you see the Gandhi Learning Center, which is actually quite exquisite because it is both Spartan as well as very informative. And I don't know of many schools, even in India, that have a dedicated Gandhi Learning Center. And so it's a school which I have been very struck by the vision of Atulji and also by the speed and quality of execution, because it's one thing to have a vision, quite another thing to be able to execute that vision and put it into action. So it's a curriculum that I think promotes academic excellence, at the same time social empathy, a sense of community service, teamwork, interest in sports, cultivating art and culture, and a deep belief in sustainability. I've participated in quite a few events centered around greening the city, around planting trees, around technological innovation that are designed for sustainability practices. So it is all these inputs that are very important, very critical for building the leadership of tomorrow. Because we are entering a world in which you will not only need a high degree of academic excellence, but also a tremendous spirit of innovation and an awareness of technology. Because we're really entering an age where technological changes are accelerating. It's a kind of a change that happens once in a century, once in 3 centuries actually. Not since the Industrial Revolution are we in such a transformative phase of human history. It is also essential in a world of great diversity and now growing concerns about identities, about nationalism and hyper-nationalism, about us versus them, about new fault lines. For people for young leaders to grow up with a sense of social empathy, a sense of inclusion, the ability to embrace diversity and to speak for oneness of mankind. And at the same time, we are also in a world where the perils of our planet, that our planet faces, is quite visible. We see almost on a regular basis the fury of natural disasters, of extreme weather conditions, of the devastations caused by climate change. All of these things are therefore challenges that the leaders of tomorrow will face. And I think the school is doing a great job in building up the leadership of tomorrow, not just in terms of making them fit for great professional careers. So it's always been a great pleasure to interact with the students. They've been part of many events of ours through these 3.5 years, whether it was that mega Pravasi Bharatiya Divas or in 2018 January, where they ran a nice students' corner. With great enthusiasm and some very sharp questions to the speakers, probably sharper than the speakers faced in the main hall. They were there for the Prime Minister's visit, which was in June 2018. And we've seen them, of course, at the mega business and innovation event last September. This GIIS, GNIS, and GIS. And of course, I have to remember that the 2 students who were the compeers at the very solemn ceremony to unveil the plaque of Mahatma Gandhi at Clifford Pier during the visit of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and in the presence of ESM Go Chok Tong. GIS and GIS have also been great partners for us in everything that we have done. But more than what they have done with us, I think I really value the contribution that the Global India Foundation and the Global GIS has made to the Singapore society. At different times, I've seen them participate in community activities that are contributing to make Singapore a better place. And that's truly an important and invaluable contribution. In a sense, invisibly so, they are becoming part of the Singaporean society, integrated deeply into the fabric of this nation. It is also something which I would also like to take a moment to thank Atulji because of the manner in which he has always come forward, not just because of GIS, which has, for example, trained hundreds of thousands of talent in the realm of art and culture and other areas of performing arts, but also in terms of social contribution. And this brings me to the point about the pandemic that we've all gone through for the past It's really just been, what, 5 months since the first case of pandemic was confirmed in Singapore on January 23rd. This has been a moment, and since then we watched how the Indian community has reacted to it. Before I get into that, I'd like to say a word of compliments and appreciation for the manner in which Singapore government has handled this pandemic. We all have to recognize that at each stage during this 5-month period, we've all felt comfortable, confident, and reassured that we would be safe and that the government would be transparent and clear in the manner in which it would share information about the actual situation. We have seen for a moment a degree of concern arising first out of returning Singaporeans and permanent residents in the middle of March, which led to some spike in the cases. And then, of course, the runaway increase in the incidence of spread of infection in the dormitories that house foreign workers. Now, we have seen also how they have responded to it, proactively, aggressively, and in a very transparent manner to contain the spread of the infection in the dormitories, which house nearly over 320,000 people. So they have been very proactive in testing, in tracing, in isolating the workers who were sick, separating those who were healthy and taking them into safer temporary accommodation, and in the manner in which they have responded to the welfare requirements and the social, psychological, and the emotional challenges that workers faced when they were put in a lockdown condition in their dormitories, where they were not allowed to go to work or to step outside the dormitories, and in many cases outside their rooms. And so the government made sure that they were getting paid their salaries through their employers. They got the meal that they wanted. They each had a care package which gave them a thermometer, masks, and sanitizers. There was free medical facilities at each of those dormitories. And there was also very detailed thinking that went into some of those initiatives. For example, they distributed over 200,000 free SIM cards to those workers that didn't have access to Wi-Fi. They enhanced and made Wi-Fi free where Wi-Fi was available. And they even gave them free access to hundreds of television channels, which they could watch during their period of confinement. Now, they even had messages from Rajnikant and Kamala Hassan and Sachin Tendulkar and Shankar Mahadevan, icons who send very special messages to the workers who were in the dormitories. I interacted with them, I spoke to them, I went to the dorm, and so they have done extremely well. The workers were very happy. And today, as we have come out of the circuit breaker, we see the situation is stable. We see that in the community spread is almost non-existent. Their incidence of infections is almost non-existent now. It's very negligible. But we also see that it has come down to a pretty stable level within the dormitories as well. So it's something that it isn't just the government, it has been the whole of community, the whole of society effort. Because when you look at a crisis, it is not one entity, just the state actors that can help you deal with the challenges. It requires a whole of society approach in which every sector has to contribute. And each of us as individuals have to make a contribution. When we observe the disciplines of safe distancing, of staying in our homes, not going to crowded places, taking on the responsibilities for our own behavior, then each of us becomes a frontline warrior in the fight against pandemic. In the Indian community, the Indian expatriate, of course, has also made an enormous contribution in the course of this period. First of all, as you all are aware, that the largest number of cases of infected Indians outside India is in Singapore, and that is because they are the workers living in dormitories. So we've had about 15,000 cases here in Singapore. 96% of those are in the dormitories. And that's 35% of all cases in Singapore. And that's a really large number. So we are grateful to the Singapore government and to the community for their response in dealing with the pandemic, especially for the workers. The community has stood up also. I know Atulji's made an enormous contribution, financial, and by getting his team, by getting his students to stand behind this effort, to be there, not just in terms of financial contribution, but to devote their time and thought to supporting the pandemic response. We've got some fascinating examples of community organizations, of Indian associations who have raised resources, who have mobilized resources for workers who've been laid off, those who have cooked for them. There are Indian religious organizations, temples, mosques, gurudwaras who have contributed to this effort. And there have been instances where people have actually gone and offered themselves as interpreters for workers in dealing with medical services. Those who have done work in terms of caring for the elderly or volunteering in different manner. We've had instances of for restaurants that have catered food for healthcare workers for weeks together. Those who have provided technology solutions to dormitories so that they could manage this pandemic were better. So there have been numerous instances of the community coming together. But that's as far as the migrant workers, as far as the larger Singaporean society is concerned. But we also had to deal with a number of other kinds of challenges. For example, a lot of Indians who were here on temporary visits got stranded when there was a lockdown in India on the 24th of March. Many were elders who had come visiting their children, or those who were there were those who had come for business, those who had come for tourism. In addition to that, we had a problem of a number of workers and professionals who had been laid off. They and their families had to return to India. There were students who had finished their courses, or students who used to finance their way through part-time work. They were all very desperate to get back to India. They had run out of their means. Then we had young students like you, Simran, who were 16, 17, who are in schools over here, but they were living in hostels, and they were feeling a sense of isolation, depression, and anxiety. So at the High Commission, we had worked with the Indian expatriate community. On our own, we had taken care of a large number of them in terms of accommodation, food, medicine, and even counseling services for those who were feeling a degree of anxiety, depression, and a sense of isolation, being in circuit breaker condition and not being able to go back home. But also found great support from the Indian expatriate community. I mean, there were any number of Indian associations who had reached out to support those who were stranded here and those who were without needs. We had groups of students for whom we had to provide dry ration because they like to cook. For others, we made arrangements with a number of Indian restaurants to provide food. But then began this big question, when can I get back to India? And it took about more than 6 weeks for the flights, repatriation flights to start. And that was a very trying period, very difficult period for us, as well as for those who were keen to go back, because you wake up every morning and you do not know when you're going to be able to go back home. There were some very tragic cases, people who had bereavement in their families, people who had left behind their minor children in India. And because there was lockdown in India, there was nobody else who could go to look after them at home. There were those whose parents or some relative, grandparents were in the terminal stages of illness. They had cancer, they had strokes, they had heart attacks. The chances of survival was limited, but they couldn't be with their loved ones because we take travel for granted. We assume, especially if you're living in Singapore, that there are 8 flights to Delhi, there are 7 flights to Mumbai, there are direct flights to 15 cities. I can go there at the drop of a hat, and suddenly all that was taken away from you. and the value of the relationships became so critical. We had those who had come here for treatment, died, but couldn't be taken back for burial or cremation. We had to make arrangements for them for their last rites to be performed over here. So there were daily tragic cases. And yet it was difficult because in India, the government could not have organized these repatriation flights without the consent of the state governments, because it's ultimately the state governments who have to take care of quarantine and testing and treatment. And many of the states which are gateway states, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Delhi, they were experiencing their own cases were rising exponentially. And the big question was, do we cater for the needs of those who are resident in our cities, or do we cater for those who come back? And remember, this is also a time when the virus was on a rampage throughout Europe, throughout the Gulf states, and in many parts of Southeast and East Asia as well. So there were these fears, and for 6 weeks, we weren't able to repatriate people. And then the flights began. And it's a very difficult process. These are not your regular commercial flights. And on a daily basis, we were getting hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, social media messages, email. I mean, if you open our email, it'd be like a flood coming out. We tried to make sure we could respond to all of them. We also had to prioritize the compelling reasons. I mean, you had women who were in their 32nd, 34th week of pregnancy, and they needed to get back before they were barred from traveling, and they didn't have the means to have the delivery over here. So there were some very tight deadlines. We had the case of a lady who wanted to go home because she was in the last 3 days of her life, last week of her life. She was suffering from cancer. Her only wish was to be with her mother when she breathed her last breath. And on a daily basis, we have this, and we had to prioritize them because the number of seats are always limited, and we had to and everyone had to register on our portal. They had to give details about their address in India, their telephone numbers in India, because we needed them for contact tracing in India. But eventually we've been able to manage it reasonably well. It took us some time to get our systems in shape. There were always, and ticketing was always a big issue, because if you sold tickets open online, it would become a commercial flight. And that would then invite questions on why are this Air India running commercial flights and others are not allowed to, and why Singapore Airlines not being able to. And this is a problem that Air India is now facing in the United States, because in the US, they started selling tickets online. For here, each ticket was approved by us, and each passenger had to be approved by us. We used to give the manifest, and we had to do this 72 hours to 60 hours in advance, because we had to sell the tickets. We couldn't have one empty seat because Delhi would then complain. And why do you have empty seats? And why are you then asking for so many repatriation flights when you don't have seats to fill? And we needed to send the full passenger manifest 48 hours in advance, because the state governments needed those details to make arrangements for quarantine and for testing and other parameters. So it's a very complex exercise. A lot of us spend the first few times in the flight at the airport. We had to get people to sign indemnity bonds, assurances that they'll pay for their quarantine, and all kinds of requirements was imposed on by the state governments. But it all came through together. I mean, our objective was to try and get everyone back home as quickly as we could. It was always a source of great regret for us if we weren't able to get everyone who wanted to be on a particular flight onto that flight. There was a great pressure from the Tamil community, because in the first wave of flights, there were none to Tamil Nadu, which has got the largest population here, who all need to be repatriated. Eventually, it's all worked out well. We've done 34 repatriation flights so far. And out of those 34, and it means for us, it's from start to the end, which means we have to be there till the time the flight takes off. So a lot of our officers, many of us spend our time at the airport managing even the departure processes. And to see if there are no shows, then we've got to get other passengers in. So 34 flights have been sent. As Atulji was saying, about 8,000 people have gone, but the number's growing. we thought the number would reduce as the flights get. And that is an indication of the state of affairs, because, you know, obviously more and more people are losing jobs, more and more people are facing difficult circumstances and would like them to go back home. And we hope that in the month of July, we will have a much larger number of flights operating out of here, and we should clear the backlog by the end of July. So this has been an extraordinary period. We've tried to stay in touch with our community. And I'd say this, that, you know, the way the community has worked here, both for Singapore and for the expatriates and for the larger Indian community that comprises those who have been here for generations, is in indications, a symbol of how they have been over here. As I have always said, this has to be, and I've traveled around the world, the most talented, accomplished, connected, and responsible diaspora I have seen anywhere. In terms of professional capacities, capabilities, and talent, they're second to none in the world, not even to those who are in Silicon Valley or in New York and London. In terms of their commitment to the community here, and in terms of their sense of togetherness, and above all, their sense of connection to their roots in India is just extraordinary. That gives us a great deal of strength and energy in all that we have achieved over the past 3.5 years. There has been, obviously, as I've been going around meeting Prime Minister, President, Deputy Prime Minister, senior ministers, and all the cabinet ministers in the course of the last few weeks and days, they have all said how much the relationship has improved in the course of 3.5 years, how much has the High Commission done here in terms of visibility, in terms of activities, and which all of them remember to be on an unprecedented scale. They have spoken about how much we have engaged the community at the grassroots level, which is something that they deeply appreciate. But none of this would have been possible. None of this would have been possible without the involvement and support of the community, the diaspora. When I came here and I interacted with people, I found that gave us the strength, because the Indian expatriate community is excelling in every field. You look at business, commerce, trade, finance, public life, legal profession, non-government organization, social service. You look at even academia in terms of education, research and development, in art and culture, in every aspect of public life, human life, business life. There has been just an extraordinary high level of achievement. And they have yet found time to give back, and it manifests itself in different ways. This is one city where, for example, you can see all the festivals of India celebrate. You can live in Delhi, but you will not be able to see the festivals of South India so clearly. Here, and if you live in South India, you might not be able to experience the vibrant colors of North Indian festivals, or Durga Puja, or Dandiya, Navratra. So everything from all parts of India is celebrated here. It's a tribute to this country that it has nurtured an environment in which everyone can be both Singaporean and at the same time be part of their own culture and celebrate it in ways which they would like to. So in so many different ways, we could see that a Diwali is more vibrant here than you might find in many parts of India, perhaps celebrated longer than in almost every city in India. You see Thaipusam, you see Pongal, you see Hari Raya, you see Onam, as I mentioned, you know, the Navratri festival, Shivratri, and I have been around to all of them and every possible community. And what is interesting is that when you see ministers belonging to different faiths, belonging to different races, coming to join you in celebration, and this is how they have built a society that is founded on a sense of harmony and togetherness and the embrace of diversity. So this is also a city which has a cultural calendar which could easily match any of the major Indian cities. I mean, this is no exaggeration to say that. If you see from January till the end, Some of them are because of this great talent in the diaspora. Some of their event managers who have brought the best of best from India over here. Then there are religious organizations that anchor. Then there are festivals which leads to great cultural events. Throughout the year, you will see something major happen. And that's, again, a level of involvement from the community which makes this possible. Similarly, this is a city where, you know, the spark of the startup community, the spark of innovation, the spark of technology is really coming from the young minds from India. These are young kids who got, I will give you an example that I just experienced. There is a young fellow called, who has made a device which costs us $18, which measures 4 parameters which are critical for COVID, which measures body temperature, heart rate, SpO2, and fatigue levels. And it is synced to your phone and it sends the data into a central monitoring system. So engineered in Bangalore, manufactured in China, and launched in Singapore. I mean, this is again an example of what young Indian talent can do. And I came across many examples, and many of you in GIS will grow to break these new horizons, create something new, and in a very fertile environment. So I think much of what we have achieved in these, and there have been so many highlights we could have spoken about, but all of you are aware of them. But it wouldn't have been possible without both the support we got from the community and their participation and involvement. And I have to say, again, definitely for record, as I've said in private, Abdulji, your support and contribution was not just forthcoming, but it was done with so much enthusiasm that it always gave us assurance that we can achieve things on scales that were unprecedented in Singapore. And we were able to do it. And everyone recognizes it here in Singapore, including the top leadership. So, and you are also the bridge between India and Singapore. You know, this is, I was just telling BPM yesterday or 2 days ago that to sow the seeds of our future partnership, we need to get our youth together more. And this diaspora has the unique ability to be an interpreter of India in Singapore and an advocate for Singapore in India. And therefore you can be the big bridge. I've told S.N. Tharman also that if you really, this has got the best talent of the world, you really need to tap the Indian market and opportunities, you need to work with them. Why is this relationship so important? It is important for a number of reasons. And I'm going to put it in very simple terms, and you'll understand what I'm saying. One, of course, is that we've always had a great relationship for 2 millennia, because this is a natural neighborhood for India. We talk of neighborhood, we speak of South Asia. But look at Myanmar, begins from Myanmar, Southeast Asia begins. We are just 16 nautical miles from between Indira Point and Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Indonesia. If you take a ship from Andamans to Singapore, it takes only 1.5 days. So we're really close. And you see this when you fly from India to Singapore and back. So this is something, it is important because you've got to have good relations with neighbors. Second, both of us share a strong cultural heritage. Singapore, I mean, identity is incomplete without its Indian heritage. That is something they recognize. There is no Singaporean identity without its Indian heritage, just as it is a Chinese heritage and a Malay heritage, and to an extent, even a European heritage. Now, that's a very important factor. We share so much in culture together. We also have a great future when it comes to economic partnership. Now, when you look around the world, Singapore is a country that derives its value globally. It's a small country. It cannot do everything here. It needs to have a market. India is going to be and it has, DPM Heng was telling me that India is one of the top priorities for them going ahead. But we agree that we cannot do this without human talent. We need people to go and build these bridges. It's not enough to just speak about potential. And therefore, I'm saying this for the young minds and the young people in our diaspora. You need to be that bridge to say that, okay, we will be channel through which we will build this economic partnership. It's important for India's prosperity. It is important for Singapore's future. Again, when we think of all the solutions we can provide for the world, you know, the most important is our synergies, our capacities in innovation. Just as India has used technology and innovation to provide banking, insurance, pension, public delivery of service, access to healthcare, to distant learning, to different kinds of government services, all of these things have been possible only because we've harnessed technology in India, developed this Aadhaar, we've got this phone, we've got these India Stack, and we've got this bank accounts of 1.2 billion people. Now, this is something which is a story which we are now can export to the rest of the world, because there are many countries that would need a similar kind of technology intervention to transform lives of their people. We're working with Singapore to try and build what is called India Stack into a global stack and use their capacities in Smart Nation to build that together. And again, it can be a great contribution for realizing the vision of sustainable development goals. We have an enormous responsibility to build peace and security in this part of the world. We all know that we are entering a world which is going to be fractious, which is going to be more contested, maybe even more bitter in terms of rivalry. And we are a people, a civilization that believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. Singapore is a country that believes in the diversity of the world. Like us, they believe in rule of law and a rules-based international order. We do the same, that as in society, as in families, in the world also, everyone must act according to established rules and norms. Only then will the world be a safe, secure place in which everyone can feel they have an opportunity to pursue their dreams. Now, this is something that you cannot take for granted. You cannot assume that the world will be the way we have seen it for the last 70 years. So therefore, India and Singapore feel like we need to work together with other like-minded countries to build that kind of a relation world for ourselves. And again, this is something which you as youth can do that, which our young minds can do. They are idealistic, they can dream, they are willing to push boundaries, they are not caught up in the baggages of the past. So it is, again, an area where I feel that India and Singapore can do a lot more as we are. So whether it is terms of building a peaceful and secure world for our children and for our future, whether it is working together for future prosperity. And remember, pandemic is going to be transformative. We have not yet understood the economic costs of this. It is going to take a year for the full economic toll to be felt. We haven't understood the impact in terms of employment, in social challenges, in terms of what it will do for families, what it will do for communities and societies, what it might do in terms of putting pressure on our social fabric. So it is important for us to find opportunities where there are, to restore the economic momentum, repair the economies, recreate those jobs for our people. And which is why we are now giving a higher degree of urgency to the economic partnership between India and Singapore. And all that I've heard in the last few weeks from the leadership and from the business community is that they have great confidence in the Indian economy. They would like to do more over there, just as we encourage Indian businesses to be here. And I have to tell you, we have 9,000 Indian companies over here. Some of them are very active. And just a week ago, the Indian Business Forum, which is made up of 49 Indian companies, made a handsome contribution to the Migrant Workers Center for the Migrant Workers Fund. And again, it shows that their commitment to Singapore as a base for their global economy. So I'd like to say this, that the future for this partnership is great. We do not have disputes. We do not have contests. We do not have doubts and hesitation We only have goodwill and warmth and trust in this and mutual respect in this relationship. We are a country, India, that does not believe in a small country or a large country. We believe that all countries, irrespective of size, are equal and sovereign, are free, and that is the level of respect with which we must deal with each other, which we do with India and Singapore. So I think that, as we go forward, I mean, particularly, I'd like GIIS to continue its great mission and the work that it is doing, continue to focus on community, continue to focus on innovation, continue to focus on sustainability, besides academic and sporting excellence. You have to prepare the leaders for tomorrow. And for the Indian community, I'd like to say that it is extremely important for us to, first of all, feel like we are part of Singapore, that this isn't just a place where we've come to work and make money and have fun, with our dreams in India. Yes, they may be, but while we are here, we must feel we are part of Singapore. We must integrate with the larger Singaporean community. We must integrate across the old Indian diaspora and the new expat community. Because that is how we will, because diversity is in our DNA. We Indians are used to hearing multiple languages at the same time, living with different traditions and customs. It's natural to us. We grow up like this. And so it's very important to find ways in which we feel like we're part of the Singaporean community, find time to contribute to society, because most of us who are here are relatively well off. We are doing well on the strength of our talent and enterprise and hard work. And this is therefore important for all of us to then give back and integrate deeply with the local community. And for the kids, I would say, for the young minds, continue being part of a great future through your continuing pursuit of innovation, pursuit of building a more sustainable planet and a more beautiful world around us. All the best to you. GIIS, I know, has its wings spread across a large part of the region. So we look forward to opportunities for future interaction and to seeing you scale greater heights in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That was a very informative and inspiring talk. I speak for the entire audience here when I say that it has enhanced our knowledge and encouraged many of us to do more. We will now begin our panel discussion. Today, we have 4 panelists with us: Aditya Dongre, Shamita Suresh Kumar, Kavish Shetty, and Rupal MS. I invite Aditya to start the conversation.
Good evening, sir. I am Aditya Dongre of Class 9 IGCSE. It is always a pleasure to have you in our midst. We have all heard your views and ideas on COVID-19. There are many valid points and ideas that we can take from it. As you are aware, many nations have entered the second phase of lockdown, which means rules have been relaxed, businesses have reopened, and the public has been allowed to intermingle. But this has caused worry of a possible resurgence of the virus, with many experts warning of a second wave. You said that society as a whole has to contribute, and each of us has to become a frontline warrior in the fight against the pandemic. So, what can the student community do to create awareness in the community about safety measures during phase 2?
Oh, that's a tough question. So, first of all, let me say this. Yes, I mean, there is always a big challenge for anyone to make a decision between how much to open and when. So how much risk can you take? Because on the one hand, you can keep everyone locked down, but completely destroy your economy, destroy the educational year of the students, and much more. And maybe even postpone the problem of pandemic for another time while you are growing your economy. So all governments have to make some very difficult choices, and they are doing it in their own ways, taking into account their local circumstances. Now we're here in Singapore and everywhere else, people are opening up, it's a really refreshing sign. But the risk of pandemic, of a second wave remains, and everyone talks about it. Prime Minister Lee said that in his speech about that it's a tricky and a difficult disease, tricky and difficult. What I would say the students can do is, first of all, they themselves have to observe every instruction on safe distancing, hygiene, and other social measures in school and at home, and on their way from school to home and back with your friends, or just going out to play sports together. But remember that this is far more important to be able to stave off, to keep off the disease, than to go out, play for one day and then fall sick and make others sick as well. So you bear a responsibility not just to yourself and to your family, but to all the other students who study with you. So I know that your sports are disrupted, your classes are disrupted, your social engagements are disrupted. But you need to be resilient, you need to be strong, you need to be patient and persevere in this effort till a vaccine is found, or we can say with safety that we will not be affected by the virus. Fortunately, your generation is so good at social media that you probably can at least interact with them and stay emotionally connected. It is never a substitute for physical, but that's what you must do. Second, you must continue to advise even your parents, your other relatives and people in your community that please wear a mask when you step out. Please maintain safe distances. Please observe all hygiene instructions. Use sanitizers, wash your hands all the time. Clean your surfaces and do everything that the government prescribed, because you see, parents listen to their children far more than you imagine. And therefore, if you tell them, then they would also be careful. So I think, and the second thing is focus on your studies, even in these difficult circumstances. So I know it's not easy to have to adjust. When adults find it hard, children will find it harder. But adjust to it, because even in these circumstances, your goals must remain clear and you must continue to pursue them despite all these temporary challenges. A year later from now, maybe a year and a half from now, all this will be behind us and we'll be going back to doing the things we always liked doing, going out to watch a movie, going out to play, maybe going out for a concert, and all the wonderful things that we like doing. But in the meantime, stay strong, stay safe, be patient, and accept the situation and don't feel upset about it.
That is certainly sound advice, Your Excellency. I think I speak for the audience here when I say that we will try our level best to execute those ideas. Thank you.
Hello, sir. I'm Shamita Suresh Kumar. I'm a first-year student of IB. I agree with you when you said the sense of us versus them is pronounced in this era, and we need social empathy even more. COVID-19 has had an adverse impact on various segments of our society. The hardest hit among them were the lower strata of the society, comprising migrant workers. Many were quarantined, which affected their livelihood. You observed that they faced social, economical, and mental challenges as a result. In the past, students and teachers posted a lot of videos to boost the morale of this community and to reach out to them to show them they're not alone. I'm sure the High Commission of India also did a lot to engage with them and reassure them in every way. Going forward, is there a way students and teachers can work with the High Commission to help out migrant workers?
That's a good question. I think more than us, I think, we should work with the Ministry of Manpower and the Migrant Workers Center, which has been set up by the Ministry of Manpower. Now, why do I say this? I say this because, as you see, the migrant workers living in dormitories include workers from not just India, but also from Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, Vietnam, and other countries. We should not give the impression that we're only concerned about Indian migrant workers. We should be concerned about all of them. And which is why when many organizations approached us in the past 2 months, that why can't we work to do something for the migrant workers? I would say that, look, I'd like you to go to, there are many NGOs who do it, but for the sake of, neutrality, we said, at least let's work with the non-government organizations set up by the Ministry of Manpower, which is the Migrant Workers Center, which is associated with them. So we directed the organizations to them to see how they could work. And it would not be a good idea to discriminate between those who come from India and those who come from Bangladesh or from other places. Now, we'd be happy to connect you to students to the Migrant Workers Center. They'll absolutely love your initiative. This is a great thing for you to think of and to do, and for the entire school student community to want to help the migrant workers. And remember that, there are different, and it's best to ask what they need rather than, it's not always material things. As you said rightly, just talking to them, sending them video messages that we think of you. There's nothing more valuable to a person than that someone is thinking of them beyond their own work. It gives you a sense of importance, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. So all of this is very important. And so I'd say that, we'd be happy to work with you. And we on our part also worked with the Ministry of Manpower, because we resisted the temptation to say, okay, here are my Indian workers. I said, of course, we will look after them if you ask us to send them back or to give them accommodation, to give them shelter, to give them food, because they are our responsibility as Indian citizens, right? But we always went by the guidance of Ministry of Manpower, because Singapore government said, remember what Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said. He said Singapore will treat migrant workers the same way as we would treat our own citizens, right? It's a great thing to say. How many countries would you find the head of the government saying, I would treat foreign workers who are living in my country the same way as I would treat my own citizens, right? So the Singapore government wanted to be in the forefront. We didn't want to give them the impression we don't trust you and we'll do our own thing. And we also tried to work with them without distinction between Indian and other workers. We had an equally strong message for workers from the others, and they appreciated it. So as GIIS in Singapore, you should be working with the local organizations for the entire migrant workers community, not just those who are from India. We all have our empathy with those who are from our country, but inculcate here the value that we belong to the entire society.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable suggestions. These small deeds of kindness will certainly uplift the morale of these people during these trying times.
Exactly. No, and I'm glad you're all doing so much for them. So it's really, really very, very heartwarming to hear this.
Hello, sir. I'm Kavish Shetty. I too am a year 1 student of IB. I have been listening to your speech intently. You pointed out that many contributed in their own little ways to help out during circuit breaker conditions, ringing temple bells, clapping in appreciation for frontline workers, etc. Frankly, COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for everyone around the world for a number of reasons. We learned tough lessons on cleanliness, on kindness, on mutual respect, and more importantly, on extending help to one another. But other than that, what are the takeaways from a situation like this, and which will help us sail through future challenges that we may encounter?
It's a very, very good question, very thoughtful question. So of course, we've all seen what we can do at our micro level. There are a number of takeaways from this. Let me go it step by step. One, of course, is at the national level. We do all need to make or work towards a more equitable society. I mean, you've seen that, as one of your colleagues said, when the world stops and work ceases, the workers and the poor are the worst hit, right? And we've seen that across the world. So we have to pursue a world that is more equitable, more just, and more inclusive, and where there are opportunities for everyone. Second, we have to have human beings at the center of our development. It is not enough to pursue growth. We say, okay, let's have an 8% growth or a 7% growth or a 10% growth. But we see, what does it mean for human beings? What does it mean for my people in terms of their lives? You can have a statistical growth rate of 8% in which 10% of the population grow at 20% and the rest of the population see incomes growing at 2% or something. And then you still have a good average of 7, 8%. So how do you make human beings, bring human beings at the center of our development objectives? Third is the absolute importance of taking care of the basics: healthcare, education, sanitation, right? Cleanliness, hygiene conditions, habitat. These are the ingredients that build resilience in society. See, Singapore has had a mortality rate of 0.1%, maybe the lowest in the world. But yet it has, one of the oldest populations. So how has that been possible, that it has so low mortality rate? Because of the conditions it has created, right? Then at the national level and at the community level, we have to make sure that we are prepared for pandemics, for disasters of any kind. You can have natural disasters which can be just as severe. So what is our response system? What is our mechanism? See, Singapore drew the right lessons from SARS, and therefore it was better prepared. At the international level also, there is a lot of things that the world needs to do. The one takeaway from here is that there was absence of global leadership. You didn't see anyone taking the lead and saying, this is a global problem and we need a global solution to this. Each country fell back on itself for me and myself. That doesn't help. It is the absence of leadership. It is the absence of collective action, which actually makes the problem worse. I mean, countries were holding on to their medical supplies. Countries were shutting down borders at short notices. There was very little information exchange initially. There was very little exchanges and support in terms of medical supplies and coordinated response. It slowly started picking up. And when it did, you could see what a difference it was making. Third, the takeaway is that the world still has to get back to focusing on sustainable development goals. And there is a need for much greater multilateral coordination and cooperation between countries to achieve a level of resilience in this world. When I say resilience, it means that if you'd had this pandemic and if there was, let's say, a global chain of distribution centers which had the masks, ventilators, which had medical supplies, which could be distributed to all the affected areas quickly, run by WHO as an international organization in which every country, rich and poor, had contributed, we might have had better responses. Finally, in terms of financials. Now, you've seen Singapore is a rich country. It has been wise. It had built up a big reserve of funds. So it could dip into those reserves and do something with it. I mean, provide support for families, workers, businesses. Now, majority of the countries are poor. And they don't have the resources to respond to this. So how does the world community come together to take care of those who are not so well endowed? Why do I say it's important? Because none of us is safe until all of us are safe. So if the infection is controlled in your country, but it is still spreading and uncontrolled in, say, country X, it can come back into your country. It will come back. Because how long are you going to keep flights, banned? At some point, you'll have to allow people to travel back and forth. So it's very important. It has shown us that human beings can say what they want in terms of achievement. They've been defeated or been challenged by an invisible foe, which is as ancient as the beginning of this world. For all our progress, we have been unable to deal with a virus which is essentially primordial or ancient. And it's a problem that has existed for centuries. And we seem today as incapable of dealing with it as we were hundreds of years ago. Maybe our mortality rate is low, but the world came to a stop. So it's important to focus on what is the nature of development? What do we mean by progress? How is it that in the 21st century, when we at the cutting edge of technology, when we have wired up the entire world, we're unable to deal with an invisible foe? So a lot of thinking has to go into the direction, and every crisis is an opportunity to reshape our thinking and reshape the direction of this world and our own societies. I think this is the biggest takeaway.
Thank you, sir. That was a remarkable answer.
Good evening, sir. I'm Rupal MS of Class 9 IGCSE. We heard many touching stories from you on the situation of the people stranded in Singapore. I'm sure there were many more cases in other countries like India. It must have been a difficult situation for authorities to keep objectivity and yet not lose their human touch in such scenarios. Your Excellency, the expat community of every country has a duty towards their adopted home country to make a gainful contribution to that society. I would like you to guide us students on how we can make meaningful contributions to the country we live in our capacity as students or as part of the future workforce.
Great. I think it's a very important and a very good thought that you have. You're all living in Singapore. Many of your parents came here. Maybe some of you were born here. Some of you came here after when you were young, when you were maybe infants, and have lived here for a few or several years in Singapore. This is your home for the time being. It may become your permanent home. Some of you will acquire the citizenship. Some of you will remain permanent residents. And some of you might even go back to other places or move on to other, go back to India or move on to other countries for education or for work. For the time being, you are here in Singapore. You have to see this, as I was saying, as your own country, that you belong to Singaporean society, that you are able to feel for the country the way you would if you were born here or you were a citizen of this country, which means its success and failures are yours, its triumphs and failures and its challenges are as much yours as anybody else's. And you have to constantly think of what is it that I can do to make it a better place, to make it continue on the path of progress. Now, many things, one of course we've spoken already about, is that in whatever way you can, find time to go beyond your school to make community contributions, serve the community, whether it is spending time with the elderly or teaching skills to some of those who are unskilled, working on sustainability projects, taking care, sometimes spending free time in the home for elderly or home for the sick. There are different ways you can work for in your community centers, wherever you live, participate in cultural activities, go to the Lunar New Year festivities or Mid-Autumn Festival or to Hari Raya or to Hanukkah, to Christmas, wish your people. You must feel the way they feel at that point of time. So build up a culture of living in harmony, in embracing the diversity, treating everyone else equally as your own without any distinction. That's a very important part of being Singaporean. Then you have to see how you can continue to participate in activities over here. There are numerous occasions where I've seen GIIS students participate in community activities. are not related to your school curricula. And that's a very good sign. Um, Participate in the debates on what's good and what's not good for the country, what the future should be. Use it. Shouldn't say, "Oh, it's not, I'm just here," or "It's not my country." It is, of course, your country. This is so. If you have ideas, you want to speak to your, political leadership. Go and say, "This is what we think should happen," as though you were speaking about your own, country. And in times of crisis, step outside and with your friends, like in pandemic, or if there is a natural disaster, flood, step out of your comfort zone and try and contribute to making things better. And eventually think of a future where you say, okay, what is it that I do, whether it is in innovation, public service, whether it is in professional career, in arts and pursuit of arts and culture. Always do this not just with the purpose of what I'm doing for myself, but how does it help make my community better, as means your surroundings, and how does it make the country better? So I frankly feel that GIS has inculcated these values in the students, and I do see them as a very enthusiastic participants, very cheerful participants in any number of activities. So continue on that path.
Thank you very much, sir.
We will now have a few questions from our audience. This question resonates with more than one audience member. Navin Katie and Vaibhav Shri Kumar are parents of GIIS students who would like to know, many parents and children have been stranded in different cities due to lockdowns as a result of COVID. This includes many members of GIIS parent community and staff. Traveling has stopped and work permits are being delayed. What words of assurance and help do you have for them?
Yeah, I know this is a serious problem. They've had a lot of people who went to India and were unable to return. They were, except if you were a Singaporean citizen or permanent resident. Those who were on employment pass, long-term visit pass, dependent pass, all kinds of alphabet soups were unable to return. And it separated families, it disrupted work, it impeded students from attending classes. After being very lax initially, Singapore realized that this is an area of vulnerability. Once Singaporeans and PR started returning, they realized they're all bringing back the infection with them. So they became very strict. We did try to work with the MOM to see if we could address some of those cases. We took it up, number of cases, and they told us where they would find some really serious issues such as disruption and separation of family, or it involved minor children who were separated from their parents, or the education was getting seriously disrupted. Then they would make exceptions, and they did. And there were those whom we were able to help. In some cases, they were not responsive. But I believe the conditions are improving. Ever since Singapore lifted the circuit breaker and feels more confident, I'm finding that the repatriation flights which are coming from India, they're not coming empty. There are a lot of Indians who are returning on those. One of the flights actually came full from Chennai. There were 160 people who came, just as many as who were going back. And these were all people who MOM had approved for return to Singapore. So I'm confident that I think things will ease up for those who are still there, but already I find the pressure on us is less. So I hope that is reassuring to people. But if there are some really serious cases, I've always said we will try to help, but we can't guarantee success because it's ultimately a foreign government and will make its own decision.
Thank you, sir. So, audience member Rajan Garg from Delhi says, we have been listening to how circumstances were difficult for many people out there. We did our part by staying at home. But we have also heard from you how frontliners like the embassy staff were working around the clock. We really appreciate all your hard work. But you spoke about human capital building a bridge between different countries. What can we do going forward and in our own little way to bring humanity back on track economically and emotionally. Is volunteering a good way to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, you need to, it's a very, very thoughtful thing, and thank you for your appreciation. Um, first you live those values in your own life. Sense of integrity, sense of ethics, sense of selfless service to people, sense of justice. That's very important, that whatever you do it with sense of fairness and justice. Have a sense of empathy, compassion, and kindness in your heart always. That is, whatever you do, does it really make a difference to people's life? And are you, even to your own friends, if you are just and fair, if you have a sense of empathy, a sense of compassion, sense of kindness to people whom you meet, you, in your own life, you will not realize how much difference you're making to those who are around you. So I'd say, and always believe in integrity and in a sense of ethics. This is so important for you with a sense of calmness, sense of peace in mind, confidence, and really no worries at all. So it's a very important trait to have as you go forward. And there are always times that, you might be tempted to take shortcuts, you'll be tempted to, not necessarily do everything by the rule, but resist those temptations. Sometimes it takes more effort, sometimes it takes a longer time, but eventually you do get what you want to achieve. That's the first thing. So your own life has to be defined by these values. That's the starting point. Because when you do that, then it will affect everything. So you don't have to be, even if you are just a professional working in a company or a bank or in public life, you pursue those values, you will see what a difference it makes to the world. Your corporate decisions will be guided by concern for society, will be concern for integrity, concern for your planet, concern for your nation, and concern for your world. Because that depends on the values you bring to the choices you make. And each of us makes choices based on certain belief systems. So your belief systems will be important on the choice you make. Second, yes, use every opportunity. And I can tell you that you, the millennials and the generation after that, and your generation, is more concerned about social, environmental, and political issues than generations before you as well. That gives me a great sense of optimism and confidence that you will all seek to pursue a world which is better than the world we created and our generation created. Because I see this sense of idealism, commitment, and passion. So volunteerism, yes, step out of your home, step out of your school whenever you have time. And don't just do it see what you can be effective at. Some are very good people skills. Some people are good at designing certain things. Some people are good at building systems. Some may be able to work with kids. Some are able to work with elders. Some are able to work with migrant workers or weaker sections of the community. You'll all have different reasons. But whoever you work with, and scale doesn't matter, because one life transformed is a universe transformed. Because that person's life will make a difference to someone else, and that will make a difference to somebody else.
Thank you, sir, for patiently answering our questions. That's all we have time for today. Questions that were not answered online will be brought to His Excellency's notice at the end of this webinar. I would like to now invite Global Schools Foundation Chairman and co-founder, Mr. Atul Tebrunekar, to share a few words with us.
Well done, Samiksha. Just to follow up on the previous question, I'm glad to share with the audience that the Ministry of Manpower has been in touch with GIS through the EDB. And as of yesterday, all the students who are stuck overseas and who have a valid student pass or a dependent pass have been approved to come back to Singapore. So that's a great initiative from the MOM with the help of EDB. And I'm also happy to share with His Excellency that our students and this was just concluded an hour before we had this webinar, our students are going to provide 5,000 meals to the communities of the foreign workers from Bangladesh, Myanmar, and India, and Sri Lanka. And this was just concluded before I came here with DNATA, which is the operator for airports, and they're going to be providing the meals, and the children are going to be contributing to that. Well done, Samiksha. I think that's been great. A thank you note is the hardest part of any program, especially when you have to thank someone as esteemed and accomplished as His Excellency the High Commissioner of India to Singapore, Mr. Javed Ashraf. Words will certainly fall short if I try, but if I try to cover in full, then even days or weeks will not be enough. On the other hand, there are a few things that we thought we can share with the audience today. Firstly, thank you, Your Excellency, for taking time from your busy schedule during the phase 2 of the circuit breaker to engage with the GIS community on such an important topic as engaging with the Indian expats in Singapore during COVID. It was such a lively and engaging experience, and a learning one too. I'm sure the students who have heard you today have taken valuable life lessons from the entire conversation. And after the interaction, we will be sharing this on social media platforms and the school's internal channels to ensure every student are able to see your messages. Secondly, I want to thank you for all the kind acts of support, encouragement, and guidance to the entire GIS fraternity and their parents and the students for the last few years. So much has been accomplished in just 3 years, but it feels like it has been a long journey since you came to Singapore as India's envoy and a representative of 1.3 billion people. In you, Singaporeans in the expat community found a learned human being of great wisdom, wild worldview, and smiling countenance, who would rather strengthen the deep-rooted bonds of friendship between the two great nations of Singapore and India. Singapore and India have hugely benefited from one of the greatest diplomats India has ever produced in the last few decades. You came here as a known figure with commendable track record in Indian administrative service and vast knowledge of history and traditions of the two wonderful nations. So if anyone else knew and articulated about India's culture and heritage so well, it was none other than late Dr. Abdul Kalam, who was the most admired president of all. GI students were fortunate and privileged to meet him personally at their campuses while he was on a state visit to Singapore as President of India, and on 2 other occasions, once to inaugurate the GIS Palestine campus and another to speak at the GIS Leadership Lecture Series. Something makes you very unique. You have a fantastic dual perspective of being a diplomat and also the mind of an entrepreneur. Very rare to find such a combination. Your creativity and leadership skills were evident whenever India and Singapore came together for community or business get-togethers or conferences. After your speech at the recent Republic Day celebrations, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, one of Singapore's well-known former diplomat and an entrepreneur, paid you a rich compliment to say that perhaps you were the best speaker anyone can find in the whole of Singapore. And I can second to that, to say that you may perhaps be the best speaker in Asia. I would request you to share some of your speeches with GI students so that they would like to use them in their research work and to enhance their understanding of India and Asia. They are so informative, and at times I personally get to learn so many new facets about the Indian culture through your lectures. As an economics graduate, an IIM alumnus, a respected diplomat, a morally upright global citizen, the list is long, so excuse us if we have missed out anything. Since your arrival, you have successfully helmed many programs that have not just added color to the diversity of Singapore's social fabric, as you mentioned in your discussions. Your hard work and dedication was visible at the Singapore edition of Pravasi Bharatiya Divas in 2018. That event was a success beyond measure. Many participants had turned up than any other Pravasi held in India. I have attended at least half a dozen of them and can tell you that with 4,000 attendees at the Singapore Pravasi, this was perhaps the largest Pravasi ever held to date since 2003. And that too with the most relevant attendees. I remember late Susmaji paying you a rich compliment to you to say that you have worked passionately and relentlessly with every Indian of every faith and culture. GI students had the unique privilege to meet Sushmaji twice, and what a great leader she was. Amazing and excellent speaker. I remember she was speaking at the University Cultural Center, and after a few minutes in English, she said, "Ab Hindi mein ho jaye," and the crowds just broke the ceiling. She was so eloquent, precise and articulate, and a precious gift she has passed on to her daughter, Basuri Suraj. Sushmaji's speeches are now used by the present Alpha generation for reference materials. Our Hindi teachers across the schools tell our students to listen to Sushmaji's speech that she has made at the UN and many other significant events so that they can become a good Hindi speaker like her as well. Coming back, your initiation of fintech activities such as Inspreneur, which seems to be an acronym from India, Singapore, and the entrepreneurs, is a step in the right direction and serves as a right platform to showcase the joint strengths of India and Singapore. More so, your reassuring presence among the community during these challenging times of COVID-19 was a great source of power for the expat community, who knew they could trust your wisdom and ability to lead from the front for their welfare. You have lived up to those expectations and went beyond a call of duty to ensure that every Bharatiya felt safe with you as a Sarathi or a companion in this fight against COVID. You have also added depth and sincerity to the ideas of community service and universal brotherhood. On behalf of the entire GIS community and expatriates in Singapore, we sincerely thank you for working towards strengthening relations between the two great nations, taking the relationships to a new high of cooperation, trust, and brotherhood. On a more personal level, we would like to thank you for your intellectual and moral contributions to the growth of GI students. Your Excellency, you are always encouraging GI students in all our endeavors. When we inaugurated the Smart Campus in 2018, you hailed the GI's efforts for setting high standards in School of the Future and 21st Century Education, which has made our students and teachers beam with joy and pride. Your appreciation for the Mahatma Gandhi Center at GIS was evident when you mentioned about it at all forums, and how the Gandhi Center was a symbol of harmony, and how the statue of Gandhi is a great inspiration for our young children to follow Gandhian principles of peace and harmony. The Indian community here was deeply touched by the mention of our very own Gandhi Center at GIS by none other than PM Lee during his speech at the Gandhi Celebrations event by India on the sidelines of UNGA or United Nations General Assembly. Be it scientific projects like Solar Urja Lamp, making for the underprivileged in India, or fitness initiatives like the International Yoga Day, or unique art performances like those during the Independence Day and Pravasi, you always found time to give GI students the necessary encouragement to showcase their patriotic talents on every platform. Your support during the Inspreneur Conference 2019 was highlighted by none other than the Maharashtra government and has been a big boost to the students' morale. Some of our student projects were even mentioned by the social media handles of the Maharashtra government. You have been humble enough to roll up your sleeves and plant a tree at the GIS campus in commemoration of Gandhi Jayanti, and when needed, are serious enough to impart your knowledge on the importance of sustainable living to young minds. We clearly remember the advice you gave to our young students during the UN Day of Nonviolence last year, when you said, moral strength will always outweigh physical strength. You invited GI students to the Netaji Subhash Chandra Memorial at Raffles Place when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited in Singapore. These students were so fortunate and thrilled to see PM Modi in person. They had thought they were being taken for a field trip, but little did they know that they were going to be with the Prime Minister of India at the Subhash Chandra Memorial. We cannot be more grateful for your reassuring presence and your kind words of wisdom in our students' endeavor to become global citizens. Be it individuals, associations, or even entities, you have always found time and engaged with everyone in your unique style of warmth and camaraderie. Not to forget your articulate and heartfelt speeches. I have said this before and I say it again. You have always managed to effortlessly capture the true essence of every gathering, and your words have always been deeply meaningful, touching, and inspiring. Your smiling yet a disciplined persona has been a perfect demeanor. Now, as you move on to bigger things, I'm sure you will continue to give the best to the community and to the nation and your signature style and make us all proud. During your stint in PMO and as High Commissioner in Singapore, you have worked very closely with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. When I first got to know from the media that you were destined to go to France, the first thing that came to our mind was, hey, this is not just a normal posting. This is something very big lined up for you. Maybe some role in activating a permanent seat at the UNSC. But with you around there, we can all say nothing is impossible. Your mother is an educationist and a teacher. Once I had a chance to ask her, how did she train you to become what you are today? She just smiled exactly the way you do, and she said, well, you have to do it. Just like our parents are being made proud by the GI students, I'm sure your mother would be feeling extremely proud of you being able to serve the community and the nation in these trying times. We hope to meet you in Paris or in the future, and wherever you are, whatever you do, we know you are going to make the 1.3 billion Indians proud. The interaction with GI students today is perhaps the best way possible to thank you for your contributions to the GIS fraternity, to the Singaporeans, and to the Indian diaspora in general. Thank you so much. Jai Hind and Bharat Mata Ki Jai.
Thank you. Thank you for your very, very kind words, and it's such an elaborate and detailed manner. I'm not sure whether all of it I deserve, but again, very grateful for your support, for your partnership, friendship, and for your leadership of a great institution. Again, we look forward to continuing my association with GIS and certainly hope to see all of you in Paris. And I'm sure France will be taken by storm by the students of GIS.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we look forward to seeing you in Paris.
I came in here, I wanted to roll back my years and be in a position to study in a campus like this. So and the range of events that they do that supplements and complements the classroom learning experiences, the standards of education, the results that they produce, but even more in a way that GIIS has stood with us, with the community, with the High Commission, with the people of Singapore in contributing to life over here, to activities over here. What I really liked about the school is the Gandhi Center here, a center which can be a source of great learning and inspiration for young children to follow Gandhian values. Gandhian values because it wasn't just about freedom of India, it was about freedom from every kind of prejudices, from oppression, from indignity, from everything that was wrong in the society. So those values remain important.
So wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so much talent in the school. Some of them are going to become filmmakers, I'm sure, and great ones at that.
Thank you.
With this, we have come to the end of the webinar. On behalf of GIIS, I would like to thank His Excellency Mr. Javed Ashraf for taking time off his busy schedule to talk to us and inspire us. I'm certain that everyone present here has a lot to take away from his speech. I take this opportunity to thank the GIIS management for making this event a great success. I would also like to thank the enthusiastic panel of students who had volunteered to make this session enlightening and educational. Lastly, I would like to thank the audience for being very cooperative and interactive throughout the session. It was wonderful to have you all here. Thank you once again and have a great evening ahead.
Just one small last thing. I forgot to mention about this. This is a beautiful orchid plant that we have grown at home, and on behalf of GIS, we would like to present this orchid plant as a token of appreciation for you. Thank you, Javedji.
Thank you very much.
We'll send to your house.
Thank you so much. Samiksha, excellent conduct of this panel discussion. You're really mature and did a great job. Also to all the panelists, very good questions. I think each of you asked some very thoughtful, incisive questions, and those are exactly the questions we need answers to, and for you to shape the world in those values. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best. Look forward to hearing great things about GIS in the future as well. And as I said, waiting to see you take Paris by storm. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best, sir.